All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a really fascinating legal battle that's been playing out in Indian courts for decades now. We're looking at a classic tug-of-war in jurisprudence. It's the strict codified letter of the law on one side, going up against the evolving spirit of social justice on the other. And specifically, we're looking at this through the lens of marriage maintenance and how the courts handle things when the very foundation of a marriage might not even be legally recognized. So we're starting right out of the gate with a massive question of fairness. Just imagine the scenario. A woman marries a man, completely unaware that he's actually already married to someone else. Now, when that relationship inevitably breaks down, does she have any right to claim financial support or maintenance from him? Or does the fact that her marriage is legally invalid literally leave her with absolutely nothing? Well, this is the exact core issue we're unpacking today, focusing specifically on the maintenance rights of a second wife who is kept completely in the dark. Over the last 40 years or so, the judicial interpretation of who qualifies as a wife has dramatically expanded. We're going to start with the super rigid interpretations from the 1980s and early 2000s, and then look at the huge pivots in 2013 and 2024 that completely flip the script for deceived women. Part 1. The Maintenance Mandate, Preventing Destitution. Okay, so to really understand this conflict, we've got to understand the baseline rule that sparked all these legal challenges in the first place. The crucial thing to know about Section 125 of the Criminal Procedure Code is that it was designed as a quick, summary remedy. Its whole goal is to prevent destitution and vagrancy among vulnerable family members. Basically, if a wife can't maintain herself, her husband is legally obligated to provide a monthly allowance. It's a humanist provision, right? It's all about making sure the bare minimum is there to sustain dependent family members. Part 2. The Void Marriage Hurdle, Strict Statutory Interpretation. Now, that sounds pretty straightforward, doesn't it? But here's where we hit a massive legal roadblock. What happens when the marriage itself isn't legally recognized by the state? This brings us to a really heavy piece of legal jargon, void ab initio. That literally means void from the very beginning. You see, under the Hindu Marriage Act, a lawful marriage requires that neither party has a living spouse at the time of the wedding. So if a man marries while his first wife is still alive, that second marriage is void ab initio. In the eyes of the law, it's a complete nullity. It's like it never even happened. Historically, this created a very stark black and white situation. If maintenance under Section 125 is reserved strictly for a wife, and a voided marriage means the woman is legally not a wife, well, then she gets nothing. It was simple math for the courts. Valid marriage equals maintenance rights, and void marriage equals zero protection. And this incredibly strict interpretation was totally cemented in the 1988 Yamunabai precedent. In this case, Yamunabai was married according to Hindu rites, but her husband's first wife was actually still alive. She eventually left him because of ill treatment and filed for maintenance. But the Supreme Court took a very hard line. They interpreted the word wife in Section 125 to mean only a legally wedded wife. Because her marriage was a complete nullity under the Hindu Marriage Act, the court ruled she was not entitled to any relief, period. Part 3. Custom and Legal Limits, the Chhattisgarh High Court ruling. So let's look at a recent example that shows just how rigid this legal framework remains today, even when we factor in local customary practices. In a recent Chhattisgarh High Court case, a man brought a woman into his home as his wife through a customary chudi marriage practice. But the evidence showed that the woman's first husband was actually still alive, and there was no proof of a legal divorce. So the High Court ruled that the subsequent customary marriage was completely void under the Act. It explicitly proved that local custom or even long-term cohabitation simply cannot override those strict statutory rules. A void marriage remains a void marriage. Part 4. The Exception for Deception, the Turning Point in 2013. As we've seen, this strict interpretation creates a huge vulnerability, and eventually the courts faced a serious moral complication. What if a man intentionally hides his first marriage just to defraud a woman? Should he really be allowed to use the law as a shield to get out of paying her maintenance? Well, this brings us to the pivotal 2013 Badshaw case. Here, a man duped a woman named Ormila into marriage by pretending he was single. They had a temple wedding, lived together, even had a kid. Only later did his first legally wedded wife just show up at their house. Ormila fled the abuse that followed and filed for maintenance, and the husband actually tried to use that 1988 Yamunabai precedent against her, claiming his marriage to Ormila was void, so she wasn't his legal wife. But this time, the Supreme Court pushed back hard. They impartially reviewed the facts and basically said, absolutely not. A husband cannot hide behind the void marriage loophole to profit from his own fraud. Because he deliberately kept Armelia in the dark and falsely claimed to be single, he couldn't turn around and weaponize the strict letter of the law to deny her maintenance. Now, to reach this conclusion, the judges pulled out a fascinating legal tool known as the mischief rule. Instead of just blindly reading the words on the page, the court looked at the exact mischief the law was originally meant to suppress. Since the whole point of Section 125 is to prevent destitution, the court reasoned that accepting the husband's strict interpretation would essentially reward him for defrauding a woman. It would literally put a roadblock in the way of justice. So they decided that, specifically for the purpose of claiming maintenance, a deceived woman simply must be treated as a legally wedded wife. This signals a huge shift. It's a move away from those strict, mechanical, adversarial rules where it's all about who technically wins on paper, and a move toward what's called social context adjudication. This is all about judges being hyper-aware of the inequalities between parties and actively stepping in to protect vulnerable individuals. It's making sure equal justice isn't just a theory, but is actually dispensed in reality. Part 5, Evolving Towards Social Justice, the 2024 Delhi High Court Breakdown. Okay, so let's see how this plays out in the modern day with a landmarked 2024 High Court ruling that beautifully solidifies this judicial pivot. In the Priya Sharma case, the Delhi High Court took the principles from that 2013 case and firmly applied them using the doctrine of estoppel. Now, this doctrine essentially means that if a husband presents himself as single and enters into a marriage in good faith with a woman, he is legally estopped or legally blocked from later changing his tune and claiming the marriage was void just to dodge his financial responsibilities. Basically, his own deception locks him into accountability. Just think about the dramatic contrast between the old letter of the law and the new spirit of the law. It's pretty wild. Traditionally, if the marriage was void, the husband had zero legal obligation and the woman had zero rights. None. But under the 2024 Delhi High Court ruling, if the woman is deceived, she is absolutely entitled to maintenance, and the husband is held entirely accountable for his fraud. The umbrella of protection has completely expanded. So what's our major takeaway from all of this? We are witnessing a really profound shift in real time. While the law itself is still incredibly strict on what technically counts as a valid Hindu marriage, the social realities are forcing the courts to adapt. Judges are stepping up to make sure that people who enter into marriages in good faith, totally trusting their partners, aren't just left economically stranded because of someone else's lies. It is a massive warning to deceptive spouses and a huge step forward for marital transparency and equitable justice. I want to leave you with a final thought on where family law goes from here. While the courts have definitely found a clever workaround to grant maintenance through judicial interpretation, critics are quick to point out that, well, it is still just a workaround. Without clear, formal legislative reform, there's always going to be a risk of inconsistent rulings. So it leaves us wondering, how might the actual legislation evolve to close these loopholes for good? Should we have mandatory marriage registrations? And beyond just paying monthly maintenance, should husbands who intentionally deceive women into these void marriages face actual criminal penalties? It's a super complex intersection of law, morality, and justice, and it's for sure going to be fascinating to watch it evolve.